welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well out there. And today we're going to head back to the 80s, folks, for another slasher film. But this time we're going to go into one of the ones in a major franchise. That gives it away right there. But before we get into it, do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe. Join me here. I greatly would appreciate that. Also, shameless plug for my TeePublic page. I'll leave a link in the description box below. And we're going to talk about one of that guy's movies right there. We're going to talk about Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. Yes, I went through the Scream Factory box set the other day. That's what I watched the other night. And if you don't have this movie, we're going to talk about it right now. But this is a good one in the franchise, one of the better ones. And I'll give you my thoughts on where I think it ranks in the franchise in this review. But the final chapter came out, which is funny to say the final chapter because we all know it went on way longer after that and still could possibly be going on right now because Jason Blum wants to get a hold of the Jason Voorhees character and make his own Friday the 13th movie. Hopefully we get a Friday the 13th movie soon. I'm not really caring about the TV series they're talking about. Jason deserves to be on the big screen, not the small screen, but we'll see what happens. End of rant. Final chapter came out April 13th of 1984. It's rated R. It's an hour and 31 minutes long. Had a budget of $1.8 to $2.6 million, and upon release, it was a nice size, very nice size hit for Paramount. It made $32.9 million. Now, to direct this film, Steve Miner had directed 2 and 3. Steve Miner did not come back. So they went to somebody who directed a really good slasher film in 81, Joseph Zito. Joseph Zito in 75 had directed a film called Abduction, which I've never seen. He directed another slasher film in 1980 called Blood Rage. It's not the Blood Rage you're thinking about. It's the one that doesn't. I'm going to watch it tonight. It's actually on YouTube. I'm going to review this movie. I've never heard of it, but if Joseph Zito directed it, that man had a magic for slasher films. I'm going to watch it. Did The Prowler in 81, and off the success of The Prowler, well, The Prowler wasn't a huge success, but people really liked that film, thought it was well directed, so that's what got him this job. And he worked with Tom Savini on The Prowler, and he brought Tom Savini back to the franchise to kill off his creation because Tom Savini did the effects in the first film, didn't do 2 or 3, came back to do Part 4 because he'd already worked with Joseph Zito, which he would go on to work with Joseph Zito again because after this, Joseph Zito would go off to do Missing in Action in 84, Invasion USA in 85, and Tom Savini came in and worked with him on Invasion USA as well for a couple makeup effects. And then Joseph Zito would also do in 88 a Dolph Lundgren movie called Red Scorpion, if you remember that film. In this film, we probably have our most notable cast in especially the early Friday the 13th films. We have Corey Feldman playing Tommy Jarvis. Obviously, Corey Feldman's star was rising around this time. Gremlins came out the same summer after this, and then The Goonies would come out, Lost Boys. So this was right at the beginning of Corey Feldman's ascension to stardom. Crispin Glover, although this is pre-Back to the Future, plays Jimmy, the hopeless guy who just wants to find somebody to love. And he was a dead fuck. I love that line. Julia Ardson's in this film as Samantha. She's one of the guy's girlfriends on this trip, and she was in Weird Science. She'd be an American Ninja, many other things. Robbie Glickman, that was his name in Seinfeld. Bruce Mahler plays Axel. He was the morgue attendant in the hospital in the beginning of the film, and the only reason I even bring him up because I always remember him from, obviously, Seinfeld. He played the Rabbi Glickman in Seinfeld, and he's memorable in that role, no doubt. But as a kid growing up, I used to watch the shit out of Police Academy, and he was Fackler in the Police Academy movies, and I always remember him from those films. So to see him in this film is just a blast for me. And Ted White played Jason in this film, and right after this film wrapped, he would go off to work with one John Carpenter as a stuntman on a little film called Starman. Just a little trivia for you there. And Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, picks up right after Friday the 13th Part 3. We see Jason laying in the barn with the axe still embedded in his head. There's a helicopter over top, shining a light down. We have police cars, ambulances, and we're focusing on one ambulance coming in, and they're there to take Jason away, which they do. They take him to the hospital. And Jason doesn't stay in the hospital too long. He kills Axel and this nurse that Axel's trying to get with, and he's making a beeline back to Crystal Lake. We're introduced to the Jarvis family. We have Tommy, his sister Trish, and her mom who live in this cabin in the woods, and that cabin's been in other famous movies as well. And right across from them is this other house that they built for the production, where these kids that we get to know, we could get an introductory scene with them in the car, especially Crispin Glover and his buddy, where we get the dead fucking line, all that stuff. And we're introduced to these kids who are going to spend the weekend or the week at this house right across from the Jarvis family. And pretty soon, Jason makes his triumphant return to Crystal Lake and starts killing people in very graphic and cool ways, especially if you're a fan of the franchise. Some of the best kills in the franchise are in this, especially for the early movies, are in this film, thanks to the great Tom Savini. And basically, it's left to Tommy and Trish to deal with Jason. And we get that great finale where Tommy buries the machete in the side of Jason's head. He drops to his knees, falls on the ground, and you see his head go down the machete, going deeper and deeper into his skull. And then we get that scene with Tommy hacking the shit out with the machete because he sees his hand twitch. And then that one last gotcha at the hospital when Tommy stares into the camera and the music swells, and that's the end of Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. What to like about this film? Well, out of the first, honestly, I'm going to say this right now. This is my favorite film in the Friday the 13th franchise. I think out of all the slashers in the 80s, that's why I wanted to re-review this film, because I've been going through a lot of 80s slasher films. This is just, I'm not saying this is the best slasher film of all time, but what I am saying is, out of pure slasher, the pure rules of a slasher film, this is one of the best ones of the 80s. This and The Prowler, I give Joseph Zito credit. He directed two of the best slashers of the 80s. And it's the darkest one of the early films of the Friday the 13th franchise, probably the darkest of the Paramount years, this film. Jason's the meanest here. I mean, he is brutal in this film. The kills are fantastic. Unfortunately, this film succumbed to the butchering of the MPAA like the other films. But you can see the gore footage, the excised gore footage on this DVD with commentary by Joseph Zito. Because the kills went on way longer than we got to see in this film. But even the quick glimpses we get of them are fantastic. And obviously the way they dispatch of Jason is awesome. I mean, it's my favorite way of how they dispatch Jason, because they basically used his weapon against him. And just to see his head slide down that blade, it's Tom Savini pulled it off and brilliantly. It still holds up to this day, even in high def. I love it. I love Ted White as Jason. He's definitely one of my favorite Jasons. He runs. He's mean as hell. He's unstoppable killing machine until Tommy Jarvis buries that machete in his head. I like the cast here. This is actually one of the better casts, especially of the early films. With Crispin Glover, it's pre-Back to the Future, but Crispin Glover is great here, and that dance is amazing. I know everybody always talks about it. And honestly, when he did that dance, he just made it up. I guess he danced like that regularly when he went out to clubs, and he wasn't actually dancing to that song. On set, he was dancing to Back in Black by AC/DC, but they couldn't get the rights for it, or there was too much, so they went with the other song that they use in the film. Corey Feldman's great here as Tommy Jarvis, although I do love Tom Matthews' version of Tommy Jarvis in Part 6. But Corey Feldman in this role is great as the nerdy kid who makes masks. Obviously, that's a nod to Tom Savini. And, and he has to be the one. He's the one that figures out he has to shave his head to look like Jason did when he died, and bait him in so he can get him in the head with the machete. I think the cast overall is pretty good here. This is probably my favorite group of kids out of all the early, especially the early ones. Julie Ardensen's great. The other guys in the cabin with the kids are great too. And so you actually kind of don't want to see them get butchered, but there's some wonderful kills here. Julie Ardensen in the raft and her boyfriend getting the up through the groin. Fantastic stuff that they pulled off. And for the budget they did it for and the amount they got back, I mean, this was supposed to be the final one. Joseph Zito was told this is the last one. Obviously, that wasn't true because there was a Part 5 the next year, and we all know how that went. It made money, but it wasn't well received because, as we all know, spoiler alert, Jason's not in that movie. So, this is a really good Friday the 13th movie, and it's well directed by Joseph Zito. He does a great job here with the rain, the darkness. He does a great job here, and I can see why Paramount picked him coming off The Prowler, because The Prowler is wonderfully directed, and you get those great Tom Savini effects here, so it made sense to turn the franchise over to him for the last one, and for him to bring Tom Savini back, the man who created Jason to begin with. Negative-wise, I really don't have many negatives. I guess the Rob character, he's supposedly there looking for his sister Sandra from Part 2. Again, I went through this in my other reviews and my ranking of this franchise. The timeline in this franchise has been fucked forever. Nobody's given a shit. I mean, the first four have probably the most connective tissue because they kind of bleed into each other, but the timelines never made sense. Because she would have been dead for a while now. obviously, after what happened, but it's like a couple days later, but he already has newspaper articles and all this stuff. None of that ever made any sense. So, I like that character, but honestly, his reasons for being there and having what he has doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Him looking for his sister, I could see, but even then, she wouldn't have been gone long enough at this point, the way the movies go, for him to even have a reason to be there. So I can't fault the movie for that, because all these movies had faults with the timeline here. As a typical slasher film, there's some people that do some dumb shit, but honestly, the kids don't know Jason's around. I mean, even the Jarvis, which you think they would have heard about it, since they live on Crystal Lake, that's the stuff that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. How the Jarvis family never heard about Jason. And, Rob shows up with these newspaper articles talking about it, and it's like, nobody knows what the hell's going on. I don't know how that's possible, but that's the way they went here. So there are some things that don't make a whole lot of sense here. With all the films in the franchise, there was always things in every installment that don't make a whole lot of sense. But there's a lot to like here. The kills, the story, how to wrapping up the Jason saga, although, like I said, it went on anyway. Still going on to this day. The cast here is probably the best cast out of the early films. And Ted White is one of my favorite Jasons. And I think Joseph Zito does a hell of a job with the directing, and Tom Savini's makeup effects are the chef's kiss here. So, Ted White, just going a little bit more trivia, Ted White was 58 at the time he played Jason in this film. He was the oldest actor ever to play Jason in a movie, in any of the Friday the 13th films. And this was the last film in the franchise that kind of picked up after the one previous to it. After this, as we know, the next one, Jason's not even in it. And part 6 is a big leap forward, because now Tommy Jarvis is a full-blown adult. And, Tom McLaughlin did kind of try to keep it a little connected to part 4 with part 6. But, this was the last time they preceded each other. And, I think if they would have ended the franchise here, it definitely would have went out on a high note. But, there's movies later on in the franchise I do appreciate. So at the end of the day, this is my favorite Friday the 13th movie. And I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. I like it that much. And it's definitely one of the best slasher films of the 80s, in my opinion. 8.5 out of 10 for Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. What are your thoughts on this one in the franchise? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Where does it rank in the franchise for you? Where would you put it? What number would you give it in the franchise? Let me know down below. I'd appreciate it. Hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, share this video. I greatly would appreciate that. I'll be back soon. But until next time, bye.